Muslims often mocked the Bab because he gave the names of attributes of God to his followers. Azim, the mighty, Tahare, the pure, Qudus, the holy. They thought this was strange. But the Bab also gave the names of God to the days of the week and the months of the year with his Badi calendar, because he was filling all of time and all of space with the attributes of God. Now, certainly we've seen with Ridvan how Baha'u'llah took this to another level by endowing every atom in creation with the capacity to have it reflect all the attributes of God. Today is the 12th day of Ridvan, the last day that Baha'u'llah was in the garden, and we spoke a little bit about the 3 holy days of the 12 days, the 1st, the 9th, and the 12th. And it's fitting that we're going to examine the last day because it's the first day that humanity was given to reflect these attributes of God, our responsibility as mirrors, if you will. So I'm very grateful to have this day off because it gives us a chance to, remember we examined what the words holiday and vacation mean, that the word holiday actually came from the word holy day, because in the past, the only holidays, the only days off were usually pilgrimages. And that the word vacation, the American word, comes from the Latin vacare, which means to empty, because the purpose of a vacation was to empty yourself of the mundane, of ego, in order to be filled with the presence of God. And so I feel that just as on most mornings we arm ourselves spiritually to go out into the world with our prayers and readings, I think holy days are this time not so much to put on our shield of protection, but to be filled with the presence of God, so that when we go back into our workplace, we can reflect. Because if we don't recharge our battery, how can we possibly reflect these attributes that have been revealed? In fact, the Bab has defined the purpose of labor and work as the endowing, that our job, in our job, is to endow or endue matter with spirit. Nadir Saidi explores this in his book Gate of the Heart, but that's a fascinating concept, that we go to work in order to bring the spirit into the world of matter. And we truly then begin to see how work is worship. But another thing that it makes me realize is that we usually speak of unity through diversity in its material and biological definitions. In other words, the unity of the races, and that the diversity of nations yet being united. But this concept of the spirituality of work makes me realize that we all have the same vocation, that we all have the same calling to reflect these attributes of God in the world of matter, and that our diversity is our different jobs and occupations through which we practice this presence of God, this mirroring of the reflections. And so this leads us to the story of Joseph in the Bible and the Quran, because he had many roles and many jobs in his lifetime, and yet he never forgot his vocation to reflect these attributes of God. Now, Joseph is a luminary in 5 different religions, and he echoes in the writings of Baha'u'llah. So, for example, to the Jews, he's the link between Abraham and the 12 tribes of Israel, he and his 11 brothers. To Christians, he's the precursor to the suffering Christ. To Muslims, he's a prophet. In fact, a lesser prophet. He's not a manifestation of God, of course, like Isaiah, a lesser prophet. He's the only prophet in Islam that has his own surah, his own chapter in the Quran. And on the first night of the Babi dispensation, the first book that the Bab then revealed to Mullah Hussein was his commentary on this surah of Joseph. Baha'u'llah refers to himself in the Kitab-i-Iqan, his book of certitude, as the divine Joseph. And the character of Joseph echoes throughout Baha'u'llah's writings and echoes throughout a goodly number of the tablets that we've been going over in days of remembrance, not always in an overt way. And so that was why I feel as if it's a good idea to kind of review the story of Joseph for those of us who are unfamiliar with it, so that we can begin to see this other level in the writings of Baha'u'llah. One other aspect of Joseph that has run through all 5 of these religious dispensations that I mentioned is he's the symbol of male chastity. We know that Tahares had that station in this age, that the Virgin Mary had it, that Fatima had it, but we don't often hear of male models of chastity. And so that's another interesting topic that we're going to explore, and Baha'u'llah's title of the Blessed Beauty and how it might be related to this image of the most handsome young man, Joseph. Tablet 22 is what we'll look at in Days of Remembrance today, and it's fitting that we look at it on the last day because this particular tablet is also not only in prayers and meditations, but the Guardian chose it as the last tablet or the culminating tablet in this amazing compilation. So on this last day of Ridvan, this 12th day, when the King of Glory began his march to Constantinople, in a sense you could say we got our marching orders to mirror these attributes of God. And so we're going to review, in a sense, a bit of what we've been examining in light of this story of Joseph and in light of Tablet 22. So as many of you know, Joseph was known for his moral and physical beauty. And he was the favorite of his father Jacob. And his father gave him this coat of many colors, which has even become a Broadway musical, the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But this coat made his brothers jealous because he clearly was the father's favorite. And then he had dreams in which the sun and the moon bowed down to him, then another one in which his brothers bowed down to him, and he unwisely recounted these dreams to his brothers, and it didn't go over too well, so they decided to kill him. Come, let us slay the dreamer, and we will see what will become of his dreams. That line was often quoted after the death of Martin Luther King Jr., that line from this book in the Bible about Joseph. In any case, they throw him in a ditch, and a caravan is passing, and he's then taken and sold into slavery in Egypt. So we see these various roles that the coat of many colors symbolizes, because in many times a garment is considered to be a symbol of the self, and we'll discuss this a little bit more. So this coat of many colors is emblematic of these various roles that Joseph is then put in. However, one of his characteristics is he never shows bitterness about the tests and the injustices that he receives, and he never seeks revenge. And so this beautiful moral character impresses people, and so he rises to become a servant, and then the overseer of servants, and then the master of his house is so pleased with him. However, his wife Zuleika, that the name comes from the Arabic word in the Quran, she is much taken with Joseph's looks, and so she keeps approaching him, if you will, and of course Joseph puts off her advances. However, rumors begin to get out around town, around Cairo, that this prominent woman has feelings for this slave boy, so to speak. And so to get back at the gossipers, she invites them, this story's in the Quran, she invites them over for dinner, these women, and when dessert is to be served, she serves oranges and paring knives to cut the orange open. But at the moment that she serves the oranges, she has Joseph enter the room. So all the women end up cutting their hands. So she gets her revenge on them because they can't take their eyes off Joseph. So this is another story about his beauty. She continues to pursue him, Zuleika. One day, even tearing off his clothes to get at him, and he runs away naked. And she's so angry that she accuses him of sexual assault, and he's put into prison. Once again, these different roles, these different tests that he goes through, but he maintains his equanimity and his steadfastness and his acquiescence to the will of God, if you will. Now, while he's in the prison, he interprets his cellmate's dream. When that cellmate gets released, he goes to work for the Pharaoh, and then the Pharaoh has a dream, and this worker tells Pharaoh, I knew someone in prison who could interpret dreams. You should ask him what this dream means. That the Pharaoh had dreamt that there were 7 really emaciated calves, and there were 7 really fatted calves. So Joseph is called out of the prison. He interprets the dream that Egypt is going to have 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. Makes sense to the Pharaoh, so he puts Joseph in charge as the overseer of the granaries. And sure enough, the 7 years of plenty come, then the 7 years of famine. And the 7 years of famine are all the surrounding lands as well. So lo and behold, who shows up in Egypt one day during the years of famine but the 11 brothers of Joseph, coming looking for food. Now Joseph, of course, recognizes them. But because this isn't a Hollywood movie, it's not about revenge. It's about spiritual transformation. And Joseph doesn't engage in revenge. In fact, he's concerned with the spiritual transformation of his brothers, so he tests them to see if they've evolved beyond their murderous and jealous ways. And they pass the test. So he bestows upon them these new garments, once again symbolizing their spiritual transformation. And he, of course, now, as the de facto ruler of Egypt, as Pharaoh's right-hand man, has a beautiful garment that he gives his brothers to take to his father Jacob back in Palestine. And Jacob had gone blind when his favorite son had disappeared and was rumored to have been dead. He went blind from his weeping. So now, when the brothers are on their way back to Palestine from a long distance, Jacob inhales the fragrance of this robe, that it has the sanctified scent of Joseph. And from miles away, he detects that Joseph is coming. And when his other sons come with the robe of Joseph, they do what they were told to do. They put it over the father's eyes, and he's given vision. So, of course, all the symbolism of how when we inhabit our true selves, we're able to teach and give vision to others. This whole notion of the garment. And throughout Baha'u'llah's writings, we have this reference to the fragrance of a garment and to beauty, of course. We know that in the Kitabi Akdas, Baha'u'llah writes, from my laws, the sweet-smelling savor of my garment can be smelled. So this is a clear reference, just as Jacob can smell from a distance the beauty of Joseph, that from obedience to the laws of Baha'u'llah, we can approach the blessed beauty. We can get closer through that, through this fragrance. Observe my commandments for the love of my beauty. That these commandments of Baha'u'llah's are not about repression at all, but they're about attainment to the beautiful, the blessed beauty of these divine attributes. So, pausing for a second, a friend of mine years ago, a Baha'i friend, she complained that she said in the writings there's always these references, to beautiful maidens being a temptation. That famous passage in Gleanings that if a true believer passed through a valley of pure gold, he wouldn't be interested, and if he saw the most comely of maidens, he would have the least desire for her beauty, physically to. I think the word that's used is be seduced by her beauty. And so she was saying, this friend of mine, how come there's never any of these stories about beautiful men tempting the women? So we have Joseph now as this reoccurring symbol of male beauty and chastity running through 5 religions. So with that, let's look at tablet number 22 on page 91 in Days of Remembrance. And of course, if you want to look at it online, I suggest you download the PDF on Baha'i Reference Library, because the paragraphs are numbered when you download it, not when you read it online. The first paragraph is really, to me, a summary of all that we've been discussing and learning about Ridvan. The very first sentence, Baha'u'llah says, since, O my God, thou hast established thyself upon the throne of thy transcendent unity, and ascended the mercy seat of thy oneness. So Baha'u'llah and God, they're on the throne. Everything is united in the ability to manifest the attributes of God. We are all one in this common vocation of mirroring those attributes. Baha'u'llah says, since thou hast done this, O my God, it befitteth thee to blot out from the hearts of all beings whatsoever may keep them back from gaining admittance into the sanctuary of thy divine mysteries. So now that this has been established, that Ridvan has been established, Baha'u'llah is going to bat for us here, asking God then to please help us to blot out from our hearts whatever will keep us from approaching the sanctuary of the presence, and so that we can mirror thy beauty, he says, and may reveal thee to others and speak of thee. Teaching is right there. And then he goes on to say, so that all who are in heaven and on earth may magnify thy unity. That would be the effect of diffusing the divine fragrances. And once again, the first sentence, the theme of unity and oneness, and then the last sentence of this paragraph. So that all may magnify thy unity and give thee glory, who is the revealer of thy oneness. So to me, it's all in a nutshell, that first paragraph. But then, with paragraph 2, we're back to the garment. And of course, there are synonyms for garment: robe, raiment, attire. But the first sentence of paragraph 2, divest then, O my God, thy servants of the garments of self and desire. So if they're going to be able to mirror forth this beauty, if they're going to be able to approach this beauty, they've got to strip off the garments of self and desire. So once again, we're back to this symbolism of a garment as a garment of the self. However, to me, because it is a garment, it's not the essential us. It's merely an adornment. And we can choose, what we choose to adorn ourselves with, what identity we choose to adorn ourselves with. Now, if we think it's hard to give up self and desire, he says in the last 2 sentences of paragraph 2, reminding us that all this can be fulfilled throughout thy dominion by thy word of command be. We were mentioning how in the obligatory prayer, the long obligatory prayer, Baha'u'llah tells us the letters B and E have been joined and knit together, that we're no longer in the age of prophecy, of becoming. We can be these attributes today. And we might not think that, but Baha'u'llah is telling us that we can, if we divest ourselves of this garment of our desires. And then in paragraph 5, since thou hast purposed, O my God, to waft over the entire creation the fragrances of the raiment, attire, of thy glorious unity, and to look upon all things with the eyes of thy bounty and thy oneness. So we're back to this theme of the unity and the oneness of the world, because all has the fragrance of the attributes of God, that all things have. And Baha'u'llah is referring again to creation as having raiment, as having clothing, this symbolism again that we get from Joseph, and the fragrance of the robe. And then in paragraph 9, page 96, this is a 2.5-page paragraph of thanksgiving and gratitude. 20 times the phrase is repeated by Baha'u'llah, I yield thee such thanks. There's such gratitude for this day, for this Ridvan. And one of the things he's yielding such thanks for, we're back to this theme of the garment. Now this is on page 96, about a dozen lines down. I yield thee such thanks as can divest the bodies of thy servants of the garments of mortality and abasement, Remember in the tablet of the Wondrous Maiden, the refrain towards the end, she's saying, "Oh, thou astounding abasement," referring to how we have abased ourselves through our doubts, through our denials, and through our boasting of self. And here we're Baha'u'llah is giving thanks to God for divesting the bodies of thy servants of the garments of mortality and abasement, and attiring them in the robes of thine eternity and thy glory. So we can do this, he's telling us, that B has been revealed. And if we have any doubts, he reminds us again in this same paragraph. It's a long paragraph, so now it's on page 98, about 8 lines from the very end of paragraph 9. I yield thee such thanks as can blot out from the hearts of men all suggestions of limitations, and inscribe the signs of thy unity. So if we blot out from our hearts all feelings of limitations, we can inscribe then the signs of the unity of God, these attributes. And it reminds me of that, the final word of the Bab when he was sending the letters of the living out into the world. He said, "Heed not thy weaknesses and frailty, fix thy gaze on the Almighty." So we're being told we can do this, as hard as it might sound. And if we recall, we discussed how in this day we can exceed the greatest accomplishments of the past, the Avicennas, the Leonardo da Vinci's, right? The Hypatias, the great female scientist from Egypt. We can exceed them all today because they didn't have access to the full flowering of these attributes of God. Now, this can sound a little bit poetic and idealistic when we're living in an oversexed society, a materialistic age, in which people's primary identity is often perceived to be physical, if not sexual, and how we often use our eyes to project our own desires, that we scan the internet with projecting our desires as opposed to looking to mirror the attributes of God as we're being asked to do. What I referred to in another video is what I call the selfie of the mind, where we're always projecting our desires into every situation and our fears, as opposed to reflecting these attributes of God. And so, once again, Baha'u'llah is asking us to mirror his blessed beauty and not to project this lowest self onto all things. So, for example, if I'm doing this video, if I have any desire to project myself as opposed to mirroring the tablets, then all of this would come to naught. So how could we do this amazing task of changing this garment of mortality for one of eternity? And to my thinking, this is not just a personal quest, although it is. We're actually together constructing a universe with these attributes of God. So to review for a second why I spent so much time on Joseph and this theme. So much of these tablets we've been reading, one was called the Tablet of the Lover and the Beloved. One was the Tablet of the Wondrous Maiden. We heard about the naked beauty being revealed. We heard this imagery, the flowing locks of hair over the bosom of the Maid of Heaven. And so living in a sexualized society, we often can see a lot of this imagery, not in the way that Rumi and the mystic poets saw it as symbolic of divine love. And so I think it's helpful if we sort of look at this very closely. So Baha'u'llah, for example, he tells us to overcloud not the beauty of the heavenly youth with the dust of self and passion. So how can we do this? And I think 2 ways I'd like to suggest are examples from history, from art. One is borrowing the concept of Plato's ladder of love. We sometimes hear the phrase platonic love, but it's sort of a misnomer for his concept, because according to Plato's ladder of love, It's the ascent a lover can take from the purely physical attraction to someone or something to the contemplation of the source of that beauty. So, for example, so much of ancient Greek sculpture was the beautiful forms of youths, because that's when the physical human form is at its most beautiful. Not when it's beginning to decay, like someone my age. But the concept of those sculptures was to contemplate that reflection of the idea or that source of the beauty. Certainly in a Judaic-Christian Islamic society, we would put this in different terms. We would say that we look at a beautiful creature as a reflection of the Creator. And so it's a different language, but for the same concept, for how we can come to embrace the blessed beauty, or the maid of heaven, so to speak. Now, the other example that can help us is the story of the Italian poet Dante, who wrote the Inferno, the Divine Comedy that many of us are familiar with, his descent into hell. But in another work, he wrote about this beautiful woman named Beatrice, who so mesmerized him, he never had a conversation with her. It wasn't a relationship. But her beauty had the effect of that Greek sculpture. In other words, she was so beautiful that it helped him in regarding this beloved human being. It led him to feel he had a glimpse of the beauty, of the blessed beauty, of the divine beauty. And so he writes this book about how the true lover looks not to conquer the beloved or to possess, but to serve and adore that source of the beauty. And so the beloved becomes a conduit or a conductor to spiritual knowledge. So both the Plato's ladder of love and Dante's concept of this vision, of the beatific vision, both regard that the love inspired by a created human being, the beloved, can lead the lover towards the love of the Creator, to the source of all beauty. And there's a beautiful engraving by the artist Gustavo Dure, in which you can see Dante and Beatrice side by side, gazing at the blessed beauty, the beatific vision. Now, to explain this, they're side by side because her reflecting of the divine beauty has led him to see the divine beauty. And so this is the true image, in my opinion, of a Baha'i marriage, because it's triangular. We will all verily abide by the love of God, not we will both. So the beloved has led the lover to see the will of God, to see the beatific vision, and that they continue to do this, and they preserve this vision. They preserve the glory of the vision that time otherwise would diminish, so that as helpmates, as lover and beloved, they lead each other to look towards the beatific vision, the blessed beauty, and to seek divine knowledge. So that's how we preserve the vision of a physical beauty. And we're going to look at some passages now in Tablet 22 that help us with this. But let me just remind us of what we learned in the second video about Baha'u'llah's Surah of Patience, or Surah of Joseph. He told us to have patience with ourselves, with our animal nature, to strive to mirror these attributes. And he gives us, with that image of to me, behind marriage, he gives us a way in which he can show us how we can still be in the physical world and yet not be of the physical world. That the physical world, that Baha'u'llah tells us in the Seven Valleys that there's a sign of God in everything. And so instead of wanting to possess and conquer someone or something that's physically beautiful, we see how it can lead us to contemplate the blessed beauty if we do the spiritual work of, in paragraph 18, page. Paragraph 18. Sanctify then. Baha'u'llah is once again praying to God to help us. Sanctify then their eyes, O my God, that they may behold the light of thy beauty. And then, let's look at paragraph 20. If I said chapter 18, I meant paragraph 18. How great is my wish to attain unto a detachment so complete that were there to appear before me those countenances which are hid within the chambers of chastity, those maidens of heaven, and the beauty of which thou didst veil from the eyes of the entire creation. Remember, the maid of heaven wouldn't descend all the way down because we weren't ready or worthy to view them. And were they to appear, those countenances, which are hid within the chambers of chastity, and the beauty of which thou didst veil from the eyes of the entire creation, and whose faces thou didst sanctify from the sight of all beings. And were they to unveil themselves in the glory of the splendors of thine incomparable beauty, I would refuse to look upon them except solely for the purpose of discerning the mysteries of thy handiwork. So this is worth contemplating at great length, this sentence in paragraph 20, that if one of these beautiful countenances in the chambers of chastity that have been hidden away from all eternity, because no eyes on earth were found worthy to glimpse it, were they to be unveiled, I would only look upon them for the purpose of discerning the mysteries of thy handiwork, for discerning the blessed beauty. So in paragraph 21, Baha'u'llah says, have mercy then upon this poor and desolate soul, who hath sought no friend but thee, and no companion except thee, and no companion except thee, and no comforter save thee. And no beloved apart from thee, nor cherished any desire but thyself. So I can understand that one phrase, to seek no beloved apart from thee, if we keep this concept in mind of this ladder of love. And I think then we can repeat that paragraph from Gleanings. And if he met the fairest and most comely of women, he would not feel his heart seduced by the least shadow of desire for her beauty. Such a one indeed is the creation of spotless chastity. From his garment, the concourse on high inhale the fragrance of sanctity. And let's conclude with the words of Abdu'l-Baha about how we can get rid of these multiple identities. And on the website, on the link, there's a beautiful link to a musical version of these passages by a Baha'i musician from Namibia in South Africa. How good it is if the friends be as close as sheaves of light, if they stand together side by side in a firm, unbroken line. For when the ray returneth to the sun, it is wiped out. And when the drop cometh to the sea, it vanisheth. And when the true lover findeth his beloved, he yieldeth up his soul. Therefore must all souls become as one soul, and all hearts as one heart. Let all be set free. from the multiple identities that were born of self and passion. And in the oneness of their love for God, find a new way of life. Happy Ridvan.